You've tuned in to the Locumstory podcast, a place where we interview physicians, PAs, and NPs from all different specialties and backgrounds about their careers, tips for success, and of course, Locum Tenens. Learn more about locums at locumstory.com.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Locumstory podcast. I'm Chase Johnson, and today we have a special guest, Gregg Crowe, a Locum Tenens consultant from Weatherby Healthcare. We're excited to hear Gregg's unique perspective on Locum Tenens and telelocums, as well as his experience working with physicians. Thanks for joining us today, Gregg.
It's my pleasure, Chase. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, can you start by telling us a little bit about your role as a locums consultant?
Sure, yeah. A locums consultant, as the name would imply, is we're information providers. We have a wide variety of levels of knowledge that the physicians have about locums. And so first and foremost, we're educators. We tell them about locums and how that works, Weatherby specifically. But then, as the relationship grows, we're telling them about the particulars of job opportunities. We're helping them understand the variables that exist that impact their potential earnings, give them recommendations on how to approach different positions. And then if and when an offer comes to pass, then we are shifting into a mode where we are not unlike a concierge. We're assisting the credentialing team. We're assisting the travel team to ensure that our physicians are providing the information that we need and that they're getting the information that they need to be successful.
Great. Excellent. You primarily work with family medicine. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Has that always been the case, or have you touched other specialties?
That is the case. Now, my team, we're the family medicine team. We work with family physicians doing outpatient medicine. We also work with urgent care physicians and physiatrists, physical medicine and rehabilitation too. But our bread and butter is family medicine.
Excellent. What would you say that's like? How would you compare it to other specialties?
It's good. I've only ever worked on family medicine, and so for me, it was a nice transition from a previous career because I think the average person is likely to be most familiar with family physicians. So
Sure.
I had an idea of what that was coming into the role. And then working with family physicians, they are, as you'd expect them to be. They're warm, they're great communicators, they see patients of all ages and are really the foundation of most people's medical care. So it's great.
That's great. Excellent. Tell me, how long have you been a consultant?
It'll be 3 years next month.
Excellent. Okay, so you've probably seen a lot of shifting in terms of the job market over those 3 years. What do locum tenens opportunities look like in family medicine? Are they pretty prevalent today, or has it gone up, gone down since you started?
Yeah. Taking kind of the COVID period as an outlier and not really speaking to that. In my time here, I think like many other specialties that the residency programs, although they're doing a great job in terms of quantity of physicians that they're graduating, it's not sufficient to meet the demand in our country. And so the market is strong for family physicians doing locums. We see a wide variety of locums physicians. Some are right out of residency and they're not interested in signing a long-term contract immediately out of residency, and they want to maybe travel a little bit before they decide where to set roots. We see physicians kind of in the middle of their career who have decided to pivot a little bit and take a little bit more seriously the concept of work-life balance. And then we see physicians who are, empty nesters. Their kids are off to college or off into their own careers, and they have a little bit less tether to a physical area. And so they are interested in traveling, experiencing other communities, and kind of just getting out there and practicing medicine, but also doing some travel along the way.
Excellent. I believe telehealth and telemedicine is becoming more increasingly, I guess, prevalent within the family medicine spectrum. Are there a lot of locums opportunities for telemedicine for family medicine practitioners, or am I making that up in my mind?
No, you're not. It's growing, certainly. I think, again, having kind of where I came into Weatherby, it was about 3 years ago. So we were on the tail end of COVID. And I think that period, or at least what I've heard from my colleagues, is that, telehealth was really the only game in town for not just for Weatherby, but for many physicians. And so I think coming out of COVID, there were a lot of physicians and larger societal trends thinking about working from home and realizing that that's a possibility that in a way and to a degree they never thought was possible. That said, because it was the only game in town during the pandemic, telehealth organizations they didn't really need our help all that much because the market was saturated. There was a lot of physicians metaphorically raising their hands saying, I'm interested in telehealth. But as things have kind of normalized, for lack of a better term, some of those telehealth companies that prior to didn't need our assistance, they're starting to need our assistance because a lot of physicians who did telehealth are returning to bricks and mortar practice. And so there is a need for many of these companies to partner with Weatherby to ensure that they have the physicians that they need. And it's a fairly unique profile. So with our kind of national reach and our deep database of great physicians, we're an ideal partner for many of those organizations.
Would you say you're getting more questions about telehealth today or when you first started? I know 3 years ago we're kind of fresh coming out of the pandemic, or have you noticed a difference or change there?
I think when I first started, there was a lot of physicians saying, you know what, I'm only interested in telehealth. Do you have telehealth opportunities? And at that time, we would redirect them and say, you know what, we really don't have any opportunities like that. That said, there are companies out there, you can pretty easily find out who they are and pursue those opportunities if you're interested in it. But it was caution, that, once you're in a certain setting for more than 2 years or 24 months, you can kind of be pigeonholed into that and your options kind of go down. And so coming out of the pandemic, there was a lot of questions and a lot of interest about that. And then there was, I would say, that talking point or that question was less frequent. And now, as telehealth companies are starting to partner with Weatherby and utilize our services, we're starting to see that question arise again. And, in both physicians looking for full-time opportunities as well as physicians looking for part-time or secondary sources of income.
Excellent. Thanks for walking us through that. What does the process look like getting a telehealth opportunity, and how does the licensing piece work? How does it differ from kind of a brick and mortar opportunity? Are there a lot of similarities, or is it wildly different?
There's a lot of similarities, in terms of credentialing and qualifying a doctor for these opportunities. There's a lot of similarities. Licensing, generally speaking, the clients that we work with, they're looking for physicians who already have licenses in hand. And so with a lot of our telehealth opportunities, you will see very specific instruction that, we need doctors with licenses in these states, or we need doctors with a license in 1 or 2 key states, and then at least 8 or more licenses, or it varies. Some clients, they want 5 or more licenses, some 10 or more licenses, others more. Generally speaking, we don't get into working to license physicians for telehealth opportunities. We're really relying upon the licenses that they already have or that they can quickly obtain, because in locums, generally speaking, the window of opportunity for doctors to start is most of our clients are looking for doctors, somewhere ranging between as soon as possible or yesterday up until 90 to 120 days out. And so, licensure in some states allows that, but in other states, it's a longer process. And so telehealth companies are asking us to bring them physicians who are already ready to begin work. That said, doctors who do qualify for the client's needs in terms of licenses, it's not uncommon for them to add additional licenses once they've begun. Because the number of licenses absolutely, in most cases, has an impact on how many patients a doctor can see, and that ties to their opportunity to earn. And so acquiring additional licenses is generally always welcome by our telehealth clients. And I tell my doctors that I work with that, don't go out there speculatively acquiring licenses, because you're kind of shooting at a moving target in that regard. If you have the licenses to qualify and you go to work doing telehealth, then see what feedback they give you. Find out from them what licenses or what states they're finding that they need coverage for, and so that your efforts are a little bit more targeted.
Do you steer a lot of your physicians into the IMLC, the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact, or does that generally help with some of those licensing issues or speed bumps, if you will?
Yeah, for sure. Now, speaking strictly about telehealth, again, it's usually a proposition where they have to have the licenses in advance. The IMLC is a great avenue for physicians who are open to a lot of different places, because the 30 some states that participate, I live in Florida, so I use the analogy of a Disney speed pass. It allows you to kind of move quickly through a process. And so when I'm talking to doctors who are approaching locums as an opportunity to travel and they are broad-minded in terms of where they'd like to go, certainly the IMLC is a great tool because it allows them to be viable candidates for jobs that otherwise might not be open to them because of the time it would take to license. As it relates to telehealth, doctors who have the IMLC, the letter of qualification through the IMLC, that's a great thing to put on a presentation to a prospective telehealth client, because it's like, yeah, here's Dr. Smith, and he or she has 8 licenses, but they have an active letter of qualification. So that means let's engage with them. And to the degree to which you need them to acquire additional licenses, there's an opportunity to do that quickly and efficiently.
Excellent. What have you seen the onboarding process looks like for a telemedicine assignment versus a traditional brick and mortar locum tenens assignment? Different?
It's different. It's like online education versus classroom education.
Sure.
It's a little bit more self-directed, and being a little bit more technically savvy is definitely a benefit for the physicians who pursue telehealth. And so, I've seen where in a bricks and mortar setting, there might be a day or two of onboarding, and that generally involves meeting the staff and checking out the lay of the land and maybe doing a little bit of shadowing and maybe some EMR training. With telehealth,
Excellent.
There's often twice as much orientation. There's the clinical piece, and this is how we operate. This is the scope of our practice. But then there's also the technical aspects of it too, because they're using computer platforms that a doctor may or may not be familiar with. And so that technical onboarding is a greater focus, I think, in telehealth than it is in bricks and mortar.
I'm sure. From your perspective, what are some of the biggest differences? You've outlined a few between the telemedicine assignments versus a traditional in-person assignment. Is there anything that you would call out or any tell that you're looking for when you're speaking with a provider of, oh, you're going to fit a lot better in a telemedicine assignment versus a traditional?
Yeah, I think doctors who are geographically limited in that, it's by their family, their spouse has a position locally, they have school-age kids, or they just love where they live and they're not looking to travel around. But when doctors say that, or if they have multiple licenses, or they self-describe themselves as being very technically savvy, those are all good opportunities to talk about telehealth. Now, that said, there are markets where doctors live where we have plenty of opportunities. In certain states, there's lots of brick and mortar opportunities, but then there are states where there are fewer. And so in those states, if a doctor is looking to make a change, or if the doctor is looking to get additional income, telehealth can be a great avenue for that.
Excellent. I'm going to go back to something you said on a previous question. You kind of mentioned 8 state licenses, or maybe 5 minimum is pretty typical for a telehealth assignment. Would you say that generally, if someone is coming in, they're looking for a job on our website or something like that, do they typically have that quantity, that many licenses, or is it rare? Yeah, I guess maybe what's typical there, Greg?
It's rare.
Okay.
It's on the rare. Generally speaking, when we meet a doctor who has a lot of licenses, and I work with doctors who have 20, 30 different state licenses. It's not always a fact, but it's a pretty high level of certainty that they're probably already involved in telehealth at some level.
Okay.
And so I don't think doctors find themselves with that many or acquire that many licenses for any other reason.
Okay.
I would say the average doctor that we work with probably has less than 5 licenses.
I see.
And many of them just 1 or 2.
I see. Okay, excellent. Thanks for walking us through that. With telehealth being so flexible, what does a typical work schedule look like for a telelocums assignment? Is it relatively standard 8 to 5 type of schedule, or is it are they different? Do the assignments vary in length, or maybe walk us through?
They vary. I think one of the things that necessitates doctors having a number of different licenses is that these telehealth organizations, they operate. In many cases, they have a national footprint as opposed to just a city or a state footprint. And so, they might have a doctor who physically resides in the Eastern time zone, but they operate from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific time. And so, doctors who work a 9-to-5 job in a bricks and mortar setting can go do telehealth in the evenings. That said, within that range of possibility, which is broader than in bricks and mortar medicine, when it comes to doing an assignment, doctors tend to have a pretty set schedule in mind. Either they're looking to do something full time, and in that case, it's generally a 40-hour work week. within the weekdays, and the times may be a little bit flexible because of the time zones. But then you also have doctors who are looking for secondary sources of income. And so it's something that they want to do maybe 20 hours a week or 25 hours a week. And that can be a couple of evenings a week and maybe a weekend, a Saturday or a Sunday for 8 hours. And so telehealth, because their operating hours extend to the entire country, they're broader almost by definition. But the actual assignments and what the doctors work, time zones aside, it's pretty similar. They're working a 20-hour week or a 40-hour week, and it's set basically to what they prefer and meets the need of the telehealth client.
Excellent. Excellent. That's great. So for physicians who have never done telehealth, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would the first step be, hey, go get a handful of licenses in XYZ state, or is there a precursor to that?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't, getting licenses kind of speculatively, that can be a time expenditure, and it's definitely an expenditure that can be frustrating, because
Sure.
by the time you get a license or a couple of licenses that you think you need for something, that job or that opening could be filled.
Sure.
So, I think that, we mentioned the IMLC. I think if I spoke to a doctor today who said, Greg, I'm very interested in doing telehealth, but they only had one or two licenses, I would advise them to, if they lived in a state where they could use that as their qualifying state, the IMLC would be a good idea for them.
Okay.
But, I would also say to those doctors that, let's explore your candidacy with some of our clients to see if there's a mutual interest there. And then we could set them on a path of acquiring additional licenses. Doctors who aren't looking to do it in a locum setting, I think the best path for them is to approach employers who do telehealth directly, because again, then the telehealth companies often partner with physicians to facilitate licensure and sometimes pay for it.
Makes sense. Okay. Yeah, that's excellent. You've called out a few specific unique challenges for physicians that are doing telemedicine. One, the licensure. Two, maybe the tech savviness. Anything else that is top of mind for you in terms of challenges that for tele versus non-tele assignments?
I think kind of one of the biggest differentiators, and it can be a dissatisfier for doctors, is that the way compensation works in telehealth. It's not completely standardized in telehealth, but generally speaking, the bricks and mortar assignments that doctors do as a locum provider are based on an hourly rate. You work X number of hours, you get a set pay rate for each hour, and that's how it goes. Whether you see 15 patients in a day or 20 patients in a day, you work 8 hours, you're getting the same level of income. In telehealth, it's generally speaking more based upon the number of encounters that you have with patients. And there can be different compensation amounts based on the type of encounter that you have. But that's kind of the reason that having a lot of licenses is important for a telehealth provider, because if you have one or two licenses and you sit down to do your 8 hours of work, you're subject to the number of people on any given day who say, I need a telehealth appointment. People tend not to schedule telehealth appointments far out in advance. I can't see my primary care physician. I don't feel like going to the urgent care. So let me do telehealth. And so that can be unpredictable. And so having just a few licenses means you're going to have fewer patients. And so it is a pay per patient proposition for the
Excellent.
most part. The doctors that I speak with, for that to be a good return on their investment of time, they have to be able to see a sufficient number of patients to earn comparable money to what they would earn in bricks and mortar, or in some cases more than they would earn in bricks and mortar, again, depending upon the client, the situation, and their particular licenses. The hours that they work makes a difference. There are, just like anything, there are peak times to telehealth, and it's probably evenings and weekends. And so a doctor who wants to work Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5, there's a consequence to that. It could be good, it could not be good, but the pay is one of the biggest things that I find myself explaining to physicians and saying, you know what, you do tend to make a little bit less doing telehealth, but the trade-off is, you're not going to airports, you're not renting, you're not having to go to car rental agencies, you're at home, you turn off your computer and dinner's ready. It's all the conveniences that come from working from home.
Love it. That's great. Before we finish up here, I want to shift gears back to you and get to know from your perspective, what's the most rewarding part of your job as a consultant?
It's playing a small part in our healthcare system. And that might sound corny and cliche, but, there are communities in our country that don't have enough physicians. And there are also physicians out there who are looking for opportunities, and they can't find opportunities that meet their personality or their lifestyle or what they're looking to accomplish. So it's really satisfying when a doctor goes on an assignment for a client in need and loves it. You go to sleep at night knowing, what, I've helped this physician and their family earn money for their family. I'm helping this client who's our partner who needs a physician, and they may be a great organization, but maybe physician recruiting isn't their core competency. And then you're helping those people in that community who are like, what, there are communities out there where a doctor may not think this is a place I want to live long term. But they're great communities, and they're places where great doctors want to spend 6 months or a year providing care and coverage for the people in that community. And it's a nice thing. It's something I'm proud of, for sure.
For sure. Yeah, I can see how that would be very satisfying at the end of the day. So
definitely.
Well, Gregg, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Your insights have been incredibly valuable, and we appreciate you sharing your expertise with our listeners.
It's been my pleasure, Chase. Thank you.
This has been the Locumstory podcast. To learn more about Locum Tenens and find additional provider stories, visit locumstory.com.